They've been watching you for months. Not your face. Not your smile. Not the mask you wear when you walk into a room full of people pretending to be alive. No, they've been watching the cracks. The silence after you say, "I'm fine." The fire in your eyes when everyone else settles. The way you don't belong in a world that rewards obedience but fears awareness. You feel it, don't you? The shift. The tension in the air, like something unseen has been taking notes, measuring your patience, testing your limits. Because here's the joke. While you thought you were lost, while you thought nobody noticed your struggle, while you believed your pain was invisible, they were studying you. Every late night, every quiet breakthrough, every moment you chose not to quit. And now the watchers want a meeting, not because you failed, not because you broke, but because you didn't. You survived the pressure. You adapted to the chaos. You learned to smile in the dark, and that terrifies them. So tonight, we're not here to beg for validation. We're not here to impress the crowd. We're here to understand why the world watches the ones who refuse to be controlled. Because maybe, just maybe, you were never being monitored to be stopped. You were being prepared to be unleashed. Let's begin. They started watching when you stopped reacting. Not when you were loud. Not when you were angry. But when you became quiet. Because silence is dangerous. Silence means you're thinking. Silence means you're calculating. Silence means you're no longer performing for the crowd. You thought no one noticed the shift. The way you stopped explaining yourself. The way you stopped defending your dreams to people who never had the courage to chase their own. You thought your transformation was invisible, that it was happening in the dark. But the dark has eyes, and those eyes were fixed on you. Observation isn't always loud. It doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't send a warning message. It simply studies. It waits. It gathers patterns. Every late-night decision. Every time you chose discipline over distraction. Every moment you swallowed your anger instead of exploding. They saw it. Because most people are predictable. They break when pressure rises. They quit when comfort disappears. They surrender when misunderstood. But you didn't. And that's when the watching intensified. You see, the world is comfortable with noise. Noise is easy to control. A loud person reveals their plans. A loud person exposes their fears. But a silent person is a mystery. And mystery makes people nervous. They noticed how you started moving differently. How your circle became smaller. How your words became fewer but sharper. How your eyes carried something heavier than emotion, intention. You weren't just surviving anymore. You were observing back. That's when the balance shifted. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. They couldn't read you the way they used to. The old version of you was transparent, heard easily, controlled easily. But the new version, calm, patient, watching. You learned that not every reaction deserves your energy. Not every insult deserves your defense. Not every opportunity deserves your time. And that restraint, that discipline, that emotional control, it changed the atmosphere around you. People started feeling it before they understood it. The way conversations pause when you enter a room. The way certain people grow uncomfortable around your calm. The way they try to provoke you just to see if the old you still exists. They're testing. Because observation works both ways. While they were studying your growth, you were studying their intentions. You began noticing who celebrated you quietly and who competed with you silently. Who supported you publicly but doubted you privately. You saw the patterns. And you stopped playing along. That's when the watching turned serious. Not because you became aggressive, but because you became aware. Awareness is threatening. A person who knows they're being watched starts moving strategically. They stop oversharing. They stop revealing weakness to those who weaponize it. They stop reacting emotionally to manipulation. And now the observers have a problem. You evolved without permission. You changed the script without announcing it. You stepped out of the role they assigned you. So they watch closer, trying to understand what you've become, trying to calculate your next move, trying to decide whether you're a threat or a force they can no longer contain. You learned how to wear it early. That smile, that polite nod, that controlled laugh at jokes that never touched your soul. The mask wasn't weakness. It was survival. Because the world doesn't reward raw emotion. It studies it. It exploits it. It labels it unstable. So you adjusted. You crafted a version of yourself that could walk through chaos without showing the storm inside. They think the mask is fake. But it's not fake. It's strategic. You don't show your full intensity to rooms that haven't earned it. You don't reveal your scars to people who only collect weaknesses. You don't expose your ambition to those who secretly hope you stay small. So you mastered control. You mastered the art of appearing calm while your mind calculated 10 moves ahead. You mastered the art of listening more than speaking. You mastered the art of letting people underestimate you. Underestimation is a gift. When they believe you're harmless, they relax. When they believe you're average, they stop guarding themselves. When they believe you're distracted, they reveal their true nature. And you watch. The mask allows you to exist in spaces without being consumed by them. It allows you to observe without being observed too deeply. It allows you to gather information while giving away almost nothing. That's power. But here's the twist. Wearing the mask too long changes you. It teaches you patience. It sharpens your emotional discipline. It forces you to separate reaction from response. You begin to realize that not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every feeling deserves to be displayed. You become selective with your words, selective with your trust, selective with your energy. And people notice something different about you, even if they can't explain it. They sense the distance. They sense that access to you is no longer automatic. The old version of you was transparent, easy to read, easy to trigger, easy to manipulate. But now, there's a barrier, a controlled expression, a measured tone. They try to crack it. They ask personal questions disguised as concern. They poke at your past. They attempt to provoke reactions just to see what's behind the curtain. But the mask doesn't slip easily anymore. Because it's no longer hiding insecurity. It's protecting growth. You realize that vulnerability without wisdom becomes ammunition in the wrong hands. So you became intentional about what you reveal and to whom. Not closed, not cold, just calculated. There's a difference. The mask isn't about pretending to be someone else. It's about choosing when to reveal who you truly are. It's about timing, control, psychological positioning. And while they think you're playing a role, you're actually building strength behind the scenes. The silence, the restraint, the observation, it's all training. Training your mind not to react impulsively. Training your emotions not to leak carelessly. Training your presence to command attention without demanding it. Now when you walk into a room, you don't need to speak loudly. The mask carries a quiet authority, a mystery, a sense that there's more beneath the surface, and that unsettles people. Because humans fear what they cannot fully read. They wonder what you're thinking. They question your intentions. They sense depth but can't measure it. And that uncertainty keeps them watching. You weren't born intense. You were forged. Every disappointment tightened the screws. Every betrayal added weight to your chest. Every time you were underestimated, laughed at, ignored, something inside you sharpened. Most people crumble when pressure rises. They complain. They search for escape routes. They blame circumstances. But you adapted. And adaptation under pressure looks terrifying to those who never had to survive it. You remember the nights when everything felt like it was collapsing, when doubt whispered louder than confidence, when failure stood so close you could feel its breath. That was the furnace. That was the heat shaping you into something stronger than comfort could ever build. Comfort creates softness. Pressure creates precision. When life cornered you, you didn't beg for mercy. You studied the walls. You searched for cracks. You calculated your next move. That's when the transformation began. Pain forced discipline. Isolation forced self-reliance. Rejection forced self-belief. And slowly, the version of you that depended on validation started fading. You stopped waiting for applause. You stopped needing reassurance. You stopped asking permission. Under pressure, your emotions hardened into control. Not numbness. Control. You learned that panic wastes energy. Anger clouds strategy. Fear exposes weakness. So you trained yourself to stay steady while everything around you shook. That steadiness unsettles people. Because when chaos erupts, most run. But you stand still. You observe. You breathe slower. You think clearer. It's not that you enjoy pressure. It's that you understand it. You've lived in it long enough that it feels familiar. And familiarity breeds mastery. They call you intense now. They say you've changed, that you're colder, harder to reach. But what they're really noticing is resilience. The softness they once recognized has been replaced with focus. Pressure carved away hesitation. Pressure removed unnecessary attachments. Pressure burned off illusions. You stopped believing every promise. You stopped trusting every smile. You stopped assuming good intentions without proof. That doesn't make you bitter. It makes you aware. When you've survived enough storms, you stop fearing the rain. There's something powerful about someone who has nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose. Pressure teaches you that loss isn't the end. It's information. It teaches you that failure isn't identity. It's instruction. While others panic at resistance, you lean into it. Because resistance signals growth. Muscles tear before they strengthen. Minds break before they expand. And identities shatter before they evolve. The heat didn't destroy you. It refined you. Now when challenges appear, you don't see obstacles. You see tests. You see opportunities to sharpen further. You see another chance to become untouchable in your focus. That's why they're uncomfortable. They expected pressure to break you. They expected stress to expose weakness. They expected struggle to make you quit. Instead, it built something controlled. Strategic. Relentless. You don't explode under pressure anymore. You compress. You condense. You become quieter, more focused, more dangerous in your determination. Because once you survive the worst version of yourself in the darkest moments, nothing external feels as threatening. Pressure didn't turn you into a monster. It turned you into someone who can survive anything. They were comfortable when you were confused. Comfortable when you doubted yourself. Comfortable when you asked for advice on decisions you already knew the answer to. Because uncertainty makes you manageable. But something shifted. You stopped second guessing your instincts. You stopped asking the room what you should do. You started listening to that quiet voice inside. The one that doesn't scream, doesn't panic, just knows. That's when the fear began. Not loud fear. Not obvious fear. Subtle fear. The kind that hides behind jokes. The kind that disguises itself as concern. The kind that says, "You've changed," when what they really mean is, "You've outgrown the version of you I understood." Awakening is unsettling to those who benefited from your sleep. When you were unaware of your worth, you tolerated less than you deserved. When you didn't know your power, You handed it away freely. When you doubted your vision, you allowed others to redraw it. But awareness rewrites everything. You began noticing manipulation in casual conversations. You started recognizing patterns in people's behavior. You saw how some only supported you when you were smaller than them. You felt the shift in energy when your confidence grew, and instead of shrinking to make them comfortable, you expanded. That expansion threatens fragile egos, because confidence without arrogance is rare and difficult to control. You're not loud about it. You're not boasting. You're just certain. Certain about your direction. Certain about your boundaries. Certain about who gets access to your time. And certainty is intimidating. They try to test it. They question your choices. They challenge your decisions. They remind you of your past mistakes, hoping to pull you backward. But the old triggers don't work anymore. You don't react the same. You don't defend yourself unnecessarily. You don't over-explain your goals. You've realized that not everyone deserves clarity about your path. Awakening sharpens your silence. You understand now that growth doesn't need an announcement. Power doesn't need approval. And vision doesn't need validation from people who can't see beyond their limitations. That realization shifts the power dynamic. You're no longer seeking permission. You're no longer competing for attention. You're no longer proving your value in rooms that already underestimated you. And that independence creates discomfort. Because when someone can't predict your insecurity, they lose leverage. When they can't trigger your fear, they lose influence. When they can't define your identity, they lose control. So they whisper. They call you distant. They call you different. They call you intense. But what they're really feeling is the loss of access to the unguarded version of you. Awakening doesn't make you superior. It makes you self-aware, and self-awareness eliminates the need to chase acceptance. You no longer bend to fit expectations that shrink you. You no longer dilute your ambition to avoid intimidating others. You've realized something powerful. The same light that guides you can blind those who prefer darkness. And instead of dimming it, you let it burn brighter. Not to scare them, but because you finally understand who you are, and nothing is more frightening than someone who knows exactly that. For months, they observed from a distance, convincing themselves it was harmless, just watching your patterns, your discipline, your silence, your rise. But observation has a limit. There comes a point when watching isn't enough anymore, because you didn't slow down. You didn't break under pressure. You didn't lose focus. You didn't return to the smaller version of yourself they understood. So now they want proximity. A meeting isn't always an invitation. Sometimes it's an evaluation, a subtle attempt to measure your intentions, to read your tone, to look into your eyes and figure out whether you're a threat or an opportunity. They want to sit across from you and feel your presence directly. Energy can't be fully analyzed from afar. Confidence can't be properly calculated through rumors. Growth can't be contained through observation alone. So they step closer. But here's what they don't realize. You've been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. Every silent battle trained your composure. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every challenge strengthened your control. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be accepted. You walk in aware of body language, aware of tone shifts, aware of who speaks first and who studies quietly. You understand that meetings aren't about words. They're about dominance of presence. And presence doesn't shout. It settles. When they finally sit in front of you, they expect to find clues. Signs of insecurity. Cracks in your certainty, hesitation in your voice, but what they find instead is calm, measured responses, unrushed movements, unshaken eye contact. That calm becomes unsettling. because they were prepared to negotiate with emotion. They were prepared to manipulate doubt. They were prepared to challenge defensiveness. But you offer none of it. You don't over-explain. You don't overshare. You don't reveal more than necessary. Every word is intentional. Every pause is controlled. You've learned that silence inside a conversation is more powerful than filling it. The meeting shifts. It's no longer them analyzing you. It becomes mutual awareness. They begin to feel studied, weighed, understood, and people grow uncomfortable when they sense they're being read. You ask simple questions, not aggressive, not confrontational, just precise. Questions that reveal motives without directly accusing. Questions that expose hesitation. And suddenly the observers feel exposed, because they assumed you were still evolving, still uncertain, still figuring yourself out. But what they encounter is someone who has already faced their worst fears alone. You don't need to prove anything in that room. You're not there for validation. You're not there for approval. You're there because growth naturally attracts attention. The meeting was never about intimidation. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that you are no longer the version they once monitored casually. Confirmation that your awareness has sharpened beyond their expectations. Confirmation that whatever they feared was growing inside you was real. And as the conversation ends, something unspoken lingers in the air. Respect, not forced, not demanded, earned through composure. Because when the watchers finally step out of the shadows and request a meeting, they're not just curious. They're acknowledging that you've become impossible to ignore.